This is a good one today, friends. We are talking about completely getting rid of your imposter syndrome so you can have superhero confidence. And imposter syndrome can disguise itself in many ways. It can mean simply just feeling like an imposter or fraud, or it could also mean just not feeling good enough at what you do. Imposter syndrome is one of the biggest things that can kill your confidence. That's why it's so important that we completely eliminate it, and that's why we talked about it on my latest podcast episode. Before we listen to that, though, be sure to hit the subscribe and get notified button so you don't miss any of these episodes. All right, on to the podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to Theater Life Uncensored, where we peel back the curtain and reveal to you what's really working in today's industry for theater artists just like you. That means you get to hear and learn how to surpass your career goals sooner and enjoy an easier, more peaceful life along the way. I'm your host, Jim Cooney, a New York City-based director-choreographer, and I'm also the founder of Amplified Artists, a membership community for theater professionals from performers to producers and everyone in between, helping you create a career and life you love. Whenever I lead a seminar on imposter syndrome, I'll ask people to raise their hands if they're really good at what they do, but talk themselves out of believing that they're really good at what they do. Or even if they do believe it, if they feel like they're not good enough. How many people do you think raise their hands? If you guessed all of them, you'd be right. So let me ask you the same thing. Do you know you're good at what you do, but talk yourself out of believing it? Or if you do believe it, do you feel like you're not good enough? Imposter syndrome is something that affects everyone, or I should say, can affect everyone, because today, for you, we're going to get rid of those imposter voices inside your head. But before we do that, be sure to hit the subscribe button in your podcast player so you don't miss any of these episodes. And while you're there, would you be so kind to give the podcast a 5-star rating and leave a positive review? It helps new people find out about this podcast, and it's a very quick and easy way to pay it forward. The more we all help each other, the more we all succeed. Also, I have a free gift for you. The biggest career struggle people seem to have is with their branding. There's so much confusion about what it is and how you do it. So to help you with this, I put together a free guide and worksheet walking you through a 3-part formula that clarifies your brand. You can grab it for free at jimcooney.me/branding. Again, that's jimcooney.me/branding, and I'll include that link in the show notes. By the way, if you want to connect outside of this episode, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at JimCooneyNYC. Pop over there and say hello. So, I want you to imagine what your life and career would be like if you no longer had any doubts about yourself. What if you walked into every audition, rehearsal, performance with superhero confidence? What would that mean to you? How would that change the way you enter a space, how you dress, how you approach people you want to work with? Imagine how unstoppable you would be. Imagine that for a moment. Okay, let's think about the opposite now. What if you went about the rest of your day today with the same feelings of being an imposter or lack of belief in yourself as you feel right now? What if you felt the same way a month from now? What about a year from now? 10 years from now? The question is, how long do you want to feel like this? Because a feeling is just that, a feeling. It's not factual. Feelings come from our thoughts, and our thoughts are subjective. You may look at someone and think their performance was brilliant, and yet they feel like it was terrible. In fact, this has probably happened to you. Have you ever had someone give you a compliment and you think in your head, oh, they're just being nice, or oh, they don't really know what they're talking about, or I can't believe they thought that was good. Have you ever felt like that? Or on the flip side, have you ever felt like you gave a horrible audition, but then ended up booking the job? Feelings are all subjective, not factual, and that means we can eliminate our feelings of imposter syndrome because there are no facts that we need to change. We just need to change our viewpoint. I'm going to give you 3 ways to do that today so you can swap out the imposter syndrome for that superhero confidence. The first, you already know just from listening to this episode thus far. It's understanding that your imposter feelings are not factual. It's all in your mind. So if you can make yourself feel like an imposter, you can also make yourself feel like an expert. I'm going to repeat that. If you can make yourself feel like an imposter, you can also make yourself feel like an expert. So if you need to write that down on a Post-it note and stick it on your mirror so you can look at it every morning, or if you want to write it at the top of your journal or make it part of your daily mantra, do that. Because just realizing you have the power to make yourself either feel like a fraud or like a superstar is enough to get yourself set on the right track. But let's take it a step further. You need to control the narrative that's in your mind instead of letting your mind control you. I'm going to repeat that one too. You need to control the narrative that's in your mind instead of letting your mind control you. That's another one you can put somewhere as part of your daily practice or morning rituals. You just heard in last week's episode about Alphonse attending a workshop we did in Amplified Artists called Expanding Narratives, which was a mental health workshop we did with equity therapy. And it was all about this very thing, expanding these narratives that are in our minds. And you heard last week how he said that this was life changing for him. Those were his words, life changing. And from there, you heard how he continued working on it with a therapist. And less than a year later, he was cast in the latest season of American Idol. So changing the narrative in your mind really does work, and it works quickly, as you can tell with Alphonse. You saw it happen. And while we're on this subject, all of the workshops we do in Amplified Artists are recorded and put into a library full of courses and trainings on a multitude of subjects related to our careers. So if you're a member, you can access this Expanding Narratives workshop at any time. And if you're not yet a member, you get instant access to the entire library the moment you join. Okay, so let's move on to the second strategy, and that is you need to be crystal clear on who you are. For example, you need to really know what you're amazing at doing. These are the things you know without a doubt you excel at. Now, this is going to help you in two ways. First, when you find yourself in those situations of things you excel at, you know you can fly high and soar because there's no imposter syndrome. Second, when you're not in one of those situations, you can let it go rather than feeling bad about yourself or like you're an imposter. That may sound obvious, but how conscious of this are you really? Most times I see people trying to be everything for everybody. They'll audition or pitch themselves for things without being right for them. So when they naturally don't book the gig, they start to doubt themselves. Whereas if you know it's not the gig for you, don't even waste your time and emotional energy on it. Now, if this all is sounding a little familiar to you, it's probably because we've talked about the same concept a few times already on this podcast series, including just a few episodes ago, the one on the 3 biggest pitfalls with your branding. It was episode 9, so you can go back and listen to that if you missed it. Also, the branding worksheet I mentioned at the top of this episode has a 3-part formula to help you get clear on your brand. And part of that is knowing what you are best at. So that's going to help eliminate your imposter syndrome as well. And for those of you who are members of Amplified Artists, there are 2 courses that will help you get even more clear on all of this. They're called Aligning Your Artistry and Branding to Book. So go check those 2 courses out. One of our members, Bobby, initially felt resistance to this idea of zeroing in on what you are best at doing because he didn't want to limit his opportunities. Well, if you listened to the branding podcast episode a few weeks ago, you heard how you are actually not limiting yourself. So I'm not going to go into all of that again here. You can go back and listen to that. But after Bobby made some changes to his website and reel that were based on him getting very specific with who he is as an artist and what he offers, he started booking so much work. In fact, he had a date set to move to New York City once the pandemic started to get more under control. But before he got here, he already had callbacks lined up. And then he booked one of them within 3 weeks of moving to New York. So, having crystal clear clarity on who you are as an artist and who you are not really does work. I know for myself, when I have an interview for a show that I know doesn't fall within my exact area of expertise, I don't really get my hopes up for it or put that much emotional energy into it. I'll still do my best at giving a great interview, but I'm fully aware I'm not the best person for the job. If I was not aware of that, I would instead be very nervous during the call, trying to make myself sound more qualified than I am, and all the time I'd be internally thinking, ugh, this is a disaster, I suck, I don't know what I'm doing, or any number of things like that. My imposter syndrome would be highly triggered. Now, sometimes I still do book those jobs. And even here, when I'm in rehearsals, I can then have an attitude of, well, they want me to be directing or choreographing this for a reason. So even if I don't think I'm the right person for it, they do, and it is their show. So that lets me relax a bit because I've acknowledged the facts of the situation and I can take the pressure off myself rather than thinking the whole time, oh, this is awful, someone else should be doing this, or things like that. Because remember, this is all subjective. So even when you don't feel like you're great at something, someone else may. These are all just feelings, they are not facts. All right, my third and final recommendation is having a community of support all the time, not just when you're in a show. This is so you don't base your value on what gig you are or are not doing. You always have a place to belong. I want you to think about this for a moment. When you're booked on a job, how is your confidence? Now, when you're not booked on a job, how is your confidence? Most people feel more confident when they're working and less confident when they're not working. So correlate those feelings with when you're booked on a job, you have a community around you. But when you're not booked on a job, that community is non existent. Sure, you have your family and friends, but you know what I'm saying here. So, subconsciously, your confidence starts to get linked and equated to situations where you have community around you. And if we take this a step further, when you're not working and seeing other people work and being part of a community, it can make you feel even more alone. So that then also affects confidence. And the less confident you feel, the easier it is to feel like an imposter. And we know that imposter syndrome affects confidence, so it becomes this vicious cycle spiraling you down and down and down. And when you are less confident, you don't do as well in auditions, so you book less work. And that also is a vicious cycle spiraling you down. So, to nip all of this in the bud, don't even let the cycle start. You can't control the jobs you get booked on, but you can control having a community around you. The best type of community is people who are in the industry and not competing with you. You want both of those things. For example, have you ever tried to get support from a friend or family member outside of our industry? It doesn't work too well because our industry is so unique. No one can really understand it unless they're in it. And heck, even we don't always fully understand it at times. On the flip side, let's say they are in the industry and there's someone that you're always at the same auditions with. How awkward is it to celebrate your callback with them when you know they didn't get called back? Or how does it feel when they want to celebrate their callback when you didn't get one? So you can see why I say the best community is people in the industry who you are not competing against. It's really important you have a community like this in place so that your imposter syndrome doesn't flare up when you're between jobs. It's for all these reasons that I wanted to create Amplified Artists so that it didn't matter whether you were working or not. You always would have a community. You always have a group of artists who have your back, who understand and support you, and that come from all different areas of the industry and different ages and in different cities. So it's mostly all, if not all, people you're not in competition with. More specifically, we have a forum that's dedicated just to sharing your wins so we can all celebrate with you. We have a forum for getting support on roadblocks you're facing so we can all chime in with ideas and solutions. We have forums for sharing resources, talking about changes in the industry, and even one to welcome new members. I always say the forums are the heartbeat of Amplified Artists. But beyond the forums, we also have town halls and Q&A calls each month where we all get together as a group and several social events and parties throughout the year too. And the proof of all this is in the pudding because whenever I've surveyed members about their confidence and if it's improved since they've joined Amplified Artists, 100% of the people who've answered said, yes, they feel more confident now. 100%. And those who didn't feel clear on who they were as an artist, 100% of them say they now feel more clear. Now, not all of this is just from having community because we also have the courses and workshops that address all kinds of needs to help you with what you are specifically struggling with. I already mentioned some examples earlier, but someone else needed an agent and they got that through a workshop we did with agents. Someone needed to form an LLC, so we helped them with that. Someone needed to redo their website from scratch and now they get nonstop compliments on it. So there are many moving parts in our career, but you don't have to figure them all out on your own. You are not alone. We can help. You have a community of support available to you. So if you want to join us, go to amplifiedartist.life. And if you have any questions, absolutely reach out to us by emailing support@amplifiedartist.life. Again, support@amplifiedartist.life. Or you can DM me personally on Instagram. I'm at Jim Cooney NYC. All right, to quickly recap the 3 strategies to give you that superhero confidence, they are 1, understand your feelings are not facts and the narrative in your mind controls your feelings. 2, get as clear as possible on who you are, what you offer, and what you're best at. And 3, gather a community around you, preferably people who are in the industry and not your competition. Do those 3 things and you'll see instant shifts in your confidence. And if you ever feel those imposter feelings starting to creep back in, you have 3 strategies now to combat it and keep it at bay so that it never affects you ever again. Before we wrap up here, don't forget you can get my 3-part branding formula guide and worksheet on my website at jimcooney.me/branding. If you've got any questions, you can give me a shout on Instagram at jimcooneynyc. Now, here's a little preview of next week's episode. See you then.
And I feel like we wait so much as performers for that contract to then tell us we're a performer, for that job, that callback, that whatever it is, to then tell us that we are worthy to be in this business. And we are worthy before we get the contract. So even as a choreographer, I hope to one day make people feel in the room that they are worthy to be in the room, even if I don't give them the job.
So there you go. If you have any questions or want to keep the conversation going, just drop a note in the comments below. I personally respond to each one. If you've liked this episode, hit the like button to help more people find out about it, and be sure to subscribe and get notified of new episodes too. Remember, there is no one on the planet who's just like you. Be true to the gifts you have and who you are. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.